Cultivate an ever-continuous power of observation. Above all things, get abroad, see the sunlight, and everything that is to be seen. Artist John Singer Sargent. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Matt Ryder is an award-winning British artist living and working in Dubai of the United Arab Emirates. Matt finds inspiration in the wild beauty of the natural world, whether it's land, sea, or sky. It's astonishing that there are still wild places left in the world that have not been painted. That's the unique situation Matt finds himself in where he lives in the Middle East. Matt takes advantage of the cooler seasons to paint outdoors among the majestic mountains where few people live. Inspired by John Singer Sargent's landscape paintings, such as the Moraine and Simplon Pass, Matt strives to capture the feel of the rugged, boulder-filled landscape before him. Braving desert heat, enduring you-shouldn't-be-here looks from rare encounters of people, and bemused by camels curious about what he is doing, are all in a day's plein air painting session with Matt Ryder. Before these isolated landscapes change and are lost forever, Matt is on a mission to capture with oil paint the extraordinary rugged beauty of these wild lands unseen by most of us. Matt Ryder is truly an enthusiastic painter, earnestly painting these wondrous and mysterious landscapes with a clear vision. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. Well, Matt, I appreciate you being on The Artful Painter today.
Thank you, and thanks again for having me.
When I first saw your artwork, I do this comparison thing, and it's not meant in a bad way, but I relate new things to things I already know. So when I first saw your artwork, it's like word association. The first thing that popped to my mind was Edgar Payne. What if Edgar Payne had gone to the United Arab Emirates and started painting? And that's what I thought of when I first saw your art.
well, I mean, that's certainly a huge compliment. I'd love to see his paintings if he would ever come here. It's probably a little late for that. But no, I mean, he's certainly an influence on my work. I mean, it's the subject matter as well. It's once you actually, I mean, certainly in his Southwest work, once he was actually going out into those deserts, and he would also go on these big epic journeys, of course. So it's nice to hear the comparison. Of course, I'm trying to do my own thing as well.
Of course,
I'm fully influenced by several artists, and he's certainly one of them.
Well, I certainly hope I don't offend anybody by doing those type of comparisons. But it's just we relate the old with the new, or the new with the old, and it helps form memories in our minds. But I just saw that and I thought, yeah, that's what Edgar Payne would do, or something similar to that, because I think about the High Sierras that he did, and then later Canyon de Chelly and all those paintings, that style and approach that he took. It was beautiful work, and of course, what that says about your work is it's also very beautiful and it's unique. I think that's one of the things. A lot of times, we as painters, we're looking for something unique, and that's hard. Especially in a world where people have lived for thousands of years and there's almost nothing new under the sun, as it were, as the old wise man said. But here you have something that's very unique, a landscape that I don't think I've ever seen any paintings done.
Yeah, it's, the actual landscape it's as old as any other landscape, but I think because of where we are and because of, how new this region is, there hasn't, as in when I say how new this region is, I mean the developed part. Dubai has really only been an established city for 50, 60 years, which in history books is I mean, it's a blink, So there isn't a huge amount of artists who have come through here and painted here, so you don't see the imagery. And when I first came out, it wasn't something that I had realized was here either. These incredible mountains and valleys and wadis. But once I'd been here for a few years and really got out to explore, just found all this amazing scenery. And then, of course, like you're saying, I was relating what I was seeing to paintings that I'd seen growing up. And I was like, this might be something to paint here. And then, once I actually got out there, it was infectious.
What draws you to that landscape?
I'd like to say it's what's here. There's something about being out in the mountains. At the risk of sounding cheesy, it's majestic out there. Like you go out and you're faced with this epic scenery. And because I live in a city, I'm surrounded by skyscrapers and super highways and a little bit of desert kind of on the outskirts. There was something that was kind of pulling me out of the city. And then when we found these incredible mountains, this in particular, the Hajar mountain range, which it's like 400 kilometers of mountains that runs through parts of the UAE and Oman as well. After the first painting I did, I was just hooked. And then the more I painted out there, I was discovering all these kind of beautiful, they're called wadis here. So it's effectively where the water kind of runs through. When we get rain, it will pass through these valleys and create these huge canyons. And then you can drive through them. There's with a 4x4, obviously, and then you can hike through them as well. So there's all these. So you have the huge mountain scenes, then you have all these kind of little side parts, at the base of the mountain, and even sometimes halfway up. And there's just so much to explore. It's amazing, really.
Are there a lot of people in that area, also checking out the mountains, tourists like we would have here?
Certainly not to that scale. I mean, we have more and more so now. There would be hikers who go out, but it would be small groups. There's a couple of small hiking groups here that would maybe be 20 or 30 people max within the group who would go. This time of year, I'm out all the time. And only once in any of these locations have I ever come across a hiking group. Yeah, there's just never anybody about. So, I mean, it's amazing because you really get to connect with obviously what you're painting. And every time I go somewhere, I'm like, nobody has seen this on a canvas before. Nobody's painted here, and that's, for me, it's a real drive to keep going and going further out and finding even more of these stunning locations.
It's astonishing to me how many places in the world are still open wilderness. Is that the right word? Where there's very few people, and yet here you are near what was considered the cradle of civilization, and yet it's where are the people? They're not there.
Yeah, I mean, in some of the areas you would pass through like small villages, and they would have goat herders, and there would be like date farms. So they'd have like date palms, and there'd be small farms where they'd pick dates. But those would be kind of on the outskirts of these kind of wilderness areas. So you'd pass through, and then the further you go, the less likely you're going to see anybody at all.
What is the geology like?
The majority of where I'm painting is it's called the Hajar Mountains. Yeah, I don't know too much about the actual geology of it. It's a range that cuts through from Oman and then cuts all the way through Ras Khaimah, Fujairah. As far as the actual geology and what that's actually made up of, I wouldn't know. Pretty rocks and boulders.
There you go. It's pretty rocks and boulders.
Yeah.
Obviously, water at some point has played a role, or geological rifts and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, you see it like with the wadis, that's where the water is coming down. And I mean, you still now obviously have to be very careful when you paint in those areas. So, when it rains, the water will literally come through like a river. So, I mean, it doesn't rain here a great deal, but when it does rain, it really rains. So you do have to be, I always keep an eye on the weather forecast before I'll go out, because even in the middle of summer, you may get a freak rain or freak bit of weather that comes through. And you'll see it. I mean, you'll be in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of one of these wadis, and then you'll see like a construction road sign. There's no road for like 10 kilometers, so it means it's washed down from 10 kilometers down the road. So it gives you an idea of the power of the water that's coming through. So yeah, there's been a few incidents of people who have been unprepared getting in trouble. I'm just careful.
I mean, that's true even in the American Southwest.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We think of that area as being super arid with little or no rain, but yet one of your paintings portrays a rising, I guess, thunderhead coming up behind the mountain. So yeah, you can have the flash floods and occasional rainstorm.
Yeah, they also do. You might be interested in this actually. There's have you ever heard of cloud seeding?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's they do a lot of cloud seeding here. So when it is actually during the winter and we're in effectively the rainy season, they will seed those clouds, and then you get these absolutely epic like thunderheads, like you're saying. And that image, I think I know the one that you're talking about. That was one of those days. It was taken from a photo, but I was actually out painting that area. Has a couple of small cloud studies. That's when you get the craziest clouds here.
Well, that's fascinating. I did not know that they did cloud seeding there. That would make sense. Yeah. Wow. So you're outdoor painting quite a bit.
So this time of year, this is I get about 4 good months to get out. And I certainly make the most of it while I can. Because during the summer, it's just far too hot to even contemplate going out, even early morning or
that makes sense.
Very late in the afternoon. But yeah, this time of year I'll try and get out at least once or twice a week. And the places I'm painting, they're all around kind of 2 hours away, between 2 and 4 hours at the most is kind of what I'd managed to go and do in a day and then come back. So yeah, I mean, obviously the timings for the paintings are also limited because of midday. Even now, it's still really. I mean, I still will paint in it, but I probably shouldn't be. It is too hot this time of year. Kind of towards the end of March, that'll be about it for the season, and then I'll pick up again in about October.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm a fair weather painter myself, so.
Well, we have plenty of that here.
Yeah, well, we have the opposite at this moment. It's 100% rain outside and cold and damp and oh well.
You're in.
I'm in Georgia.
You're in. Is
Atlanta,
it Georgia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Halfway around the world.
Definitely a different climate to what we have at the moment.
Yeah.
Today it was around. I think so. It's about 30 here, so I think that's about 85 or so.
Right.
Fahrenheit. So yeah, pretty pleasant.
You have this magnificent scenery that's just a short distance away. You said about 2 hours away. How do you pick what you want to paint? What captures your eye when you travel to paint outdoors?
I mean, of course, it just depends on the day. It depends on the light. So a lot of the time, I'm waiting for, because I'll go out very early in the morning. So I leave my house around kind of 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'll try and get to the locations for sunrise. But a lot of the time here, with the sunrise comes this, we get a lot of kind of fog and mist around the base of the mountains and certainly up high. So a lot of the time I'm just waiting for that to clear. And once that clears, it will dictate whether I'm going to do something that's kind of a crop of a scene or whether I'm going for the bigger vista. But generally, I do find myself drawn to kind of the base of the mountains. So kind of looking up to get some kind of perspective and to get some kind of scale. But more and more, I seem to be drawn just to rock formations and just kind of interesting plays on light within smaller areas of rock. For bigger studio pieces that I do, I will tend to go for the bigger scene. And then when I'm out plein air, I'll generally go for something a little bit kind of closer up and then something in the way of a light play on rocks. But then, of course, I'm using the colors from what I'm seeing outdoors and getting from those references to what I'm bringing into the studio.
Could you tell me a little bit about the kit that you take when you go outdoor painting?
now I've got a pretty good kit. That wasn't always the case, so I've just
really?
Well, I've been refining my gear for a little while, but I'm really happy with what I have now. Yeah. So, I mean, the main thing is the shade box, and I use the Edge Pro, the paint book, which I love. I mean, for a start, it's super light. So I obviously I'm traveling quite a bit, so I paint a lot in Ireland as well. So I mean, we can have a chat about that a little bit later on. But so I need something which I can travel with easily in my backpack, and of course, because I'm hiking around a lot of these areas as well, I need something that was quite light. So the paint book is perfect. I use it quite a lot in the studio as well because it holds big enough panels to do something like 1824 is as big as I would go on it, but I mean that would still be good enough for the studio. So it's nice and versatile. So that's my pochade box, and then I pair that with a Manfrotto tripod, a carbon fiber one. So it's
I love
fairly
those.
light.
Yeah, I have one of those too.
Yeah, that's great. Whenever I talk to anybody about my setup, the most important thing for me, I mean, of course, the pochade is very important, but the tripod is just as important, to have something that's sturdy. The amount of people that I've seen who have had kits with a very good pochade box put onto a very cheap easel, and it doesn't even keep the pochade box still, so it's kind of flapping around. So it's really important. And then I have a hook on. I've just attached a hook to the tripod so I can clip my bag on, and that kind of weighs everything down a little bit. I just obviously have a range of brushes which I take out. So I use Rosemary & Co. Mainly for plein air, I use the Ivory range. They're synthetic, but I use the Eclipse ones as well. And I tend to use long flats. Then just have a limited amount of paints I have. So I do keep it down when I'm hiking a little bit more so than when I'm in the studio. But so obviously I take my paints out with me, and then that's about it. Kitchen roll, a few other bits and pieces. Rubbish bag, lots and lots of water.
That's the most important piece of kit right there, right? To have water with you. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. So, I mean, I did a hike, it was a couple of weeks ago now, but it ended up it was almost 4 or 5 hours, like a round trip hike, plus the painting in the middle.
Oh, wow.
And the majority, going to the location was pretty much all uphill. And then obviously coming down was all downhill. So it was quite an intense hike. So I had to really kind of trim down the kit that I took there. And then, because the water is so important when you're out that long, the pack is quite heavy. You just got to prioritize when you're out in these kind of locations.
Imagine you got to have a large brim hat and some sunscreen as well.
Sunscreen, yeah. So if anyone ever catches sight of me while I'm out, I'm just basically covered in sun cream, so like thick white paint on my face, and then so obviously I wear a hat as well when I'm out.
Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, I mean with the gear that I'm wearing, it's I try and keep it lightweight, but I mean shorts are really a no-no here, purely because I mean it's so hot and the sun is beating down, so I do wear long trousers, but they're hiking trousers. So
yeah, it's counterintuitive to a lot of folks here, but you really do need to be covered. No matter how hot it is, it makes sense. Yeah,
I mean, even in the winter here, it's the sun is brutal. It's you do have to be very careful.
On your palette, so you're limited in the amount of paint that you can take. So what colors would I find on your palette?
So my full palette, I use a split warm cool palette generally. So I have titanium white, which I get through a copious amount of. And then I've started using recently, instead of a lemon yellow, I got onto, there was a Michael Harding lemon yellow, or I think it was lead tin yellow, but I couldn't get it here. So I found there's a color called nickel titanium yellow.
Oh, yes.
It's beautiful. So it's a very cool yellow. It's kind of leans a little bit more towards the green, but it's a beautiful color for the landscape here. It works really, really well as my cool yellow. And then I'd use a cadmium yellow medium. Occasionally I'll take out a cad yellow deep, but I'm tending to leave that off my palette more and more now. Yellow ochre, I get through a lot of that. And cadmium orange. Depending on the mood, I'll either use cadmium red light but more often than not now I've actually switched to vermilion. It's a little more orange, but it just has a beautiful feel to it. So
which brand is
vermilion
that?
Is Rembrandt is what I'm using.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so the majority of the colours I'm using are either Rembrandt, Old Holland, and occasionally Michael Harding, which I would have picked up on my travels somewhere and then brought back and then savoured. So not using it too much.
Exactly.
So I can easily get Rembrandt and Old Holland here, and Gamblin as well. So, and then so vermilion is beautiful, and then I'll use Gamblin have a nice permanent alizarin, which I use. And then what else am I using? A transparent red oxide. That's absolutely key for what I'm using here. So I used to use a burnt sienna, and then I switched it to the transparent red oxide. But yeah, pretty much, certainly for the landscapes here, when I'm painting, almost every single painting will start with a transparent red oxide wash. So I get through a lot of that. And you'll see that in the majority of the paintings kind of coming through, unless it's a particularly cool painting where I'll use something else to do the underpainting. The only green that I have on my palette is Viridian. It's beautiful color. Again, I'm using a Rembrandt Viridian. Yeah, I get through quite a bit of that. The other color, which I absolutely love, and this is on my palette and pretty much in every single mixture that I put together, is King's Blue.
King's Blue? Who makes that? Is that also
King's
Rembrandt?
Blue. So the one that I use is Rembrandt. I've tried the Michael Harding one, which is also nice, and also Old Holland make one as well. But the Rembrandt, it's just the right tint for me. It's perfect for kind of graying colours down a little bit, and also it's really nice for skies. It's very close to the kind of midday sky that we get here, so I don't have to do too much in the way of messing with the colour. So I'll mix in generally a little bit of yellow ochre, just to kind of green it just a touch, and then obviously some titanium whites, but it's perfect for the skies. And also it's just really nice to use in the shadows as well.
I'll have to check that out. I've never tried that.
Yeah, once you give it a go, I apologize because it's probably going to end up on your palette for a while. It's beautiful to look at as well.
You scoundrel, you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But, I mean, straight out of the tube. It's a bit like when you put cobalt blue on your palette and you can just sit and look at it and just think, yeah, that's beautiful. But it's a lot cheaper than cobalt blue. So, so that is a color that I did. So I had cobalt blue on my palette for a long time and actually recently took it off. I just found I wasn't using it enough to justify it. So I use the King's Blue, and I also have an ultramarine blue on the palette. And then I have Ivory Black is on there, which I use really just for my greens. So I mix it with a nice yellow ochre, and it makes these beautiful greens, which can be just warmed up a little bit with the either the vermilion or cad red, whichever's on there. And then the other color, which I occasionally have on, I always have it on in the studio, but I don't take it out too much, is Michael Harding makes a brilliant pink, as do Old Holland actually. So it's very similar in color. So it's lovely. That's it. That's my palette.
Nice. So, but now that's a lot of tubes of paint. So I'm wondering, when you did that, when you did that 5-hour hike, did you have the tubes of paint, or did you put it on your palette before you went?
No, I take the tubes with me.
Okay.
So I probably, in hindsight, I probably should put it out on my palette. But I always have this fear of it just slipping down, and then if I don't have the paint with me, and then it all gets mashed up, then, you know, if I've hiked for that long, it's just ruined my day. So I just I have bigger tubes in the studio, and then I take smaller tubes out when I go out. And like I said, I'll tend to drop a couple of colors. In the scheme of things, it doesn't, you know, 1 or 2 extra tubes of small paint don't really add that much weight to a pack.
What are you painting on?
when I'm going outside, and also for the smaller studio stuff, I'm using linen wrap panels. So I use I get them shipped over by Raymar.
Yes.
So I love their linens. I mean, it's not the cheapest way for me to paint, especially plein air, because there are quite high shipping costs. But I'm just in love with the linen. So it's I use it's a C15.
Yeah, that's a nice texture. Yeah, is that on a gator board or some other or hard? What's it mounted to?
I use the it's on I think it's hardboard.
Hardboard,
like an MDF.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I tried out when I first started getting my panels from them. I was getting the Featherlights panels,
right?
Which are, I mean, they're great, but I prefer just to have a little bit of weight in the panel as well. Yeah. So I paint on the linen, and then when I'm in the studio, I get large linens, which are stretched.
Yeah, I've just bought a bunch of raw linen. I want to practice making my own panels, just to see what it's like. I don't know if that's stupid or not. But it's there's probably better uses of my time, but I'm always curious about the process of creating the substrates and the tools that we use to paint with. I'm fascinated by those things.
Yeah,
it's a rabbit hole.
I'm always tempted by it, but it's very time consuming. It's very messy. It's or I worry it'd be messy. I mean, I just know that if I buy them from somebody who knows what they're doing, it's going to be a better surface. It's going to be archival. It's not going to peel off the surface that I'm painting on. But yeah, with the amount that I actually paint, it would probably save me a considerable amount of money just to get the raw linens and try and do it myself.
But you got to think about your time, right? You know, where is your time better spent? I get that. You know, it's I just have many interests, and I love getting my hands on things, and sometimes that's to my detriment. So I'm not advising it.
I definitely, whenever I go to, like when I'm around other plein air painters, if I go to an event, there's quite a big event in Ireland, and there will always be people who are painting on panels that they've made themselves at home, and I'm like, I rock up with my Raymar panels, and like, it doesn't mean it's going to be a better painting. Everyone's like, oh, they're lovely panels. It does not mean it's going to be a better painting. It just means I haven't made one myself.
Well, I appreciate you going into the nuts and bolts. I don't do that a lot on the podcast, but to me, it's fun. I like the tools. I like the gadgets and I'm always curious. And it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to know what people are using as well. You know, it's so many people have their own palettes that they use. I think it's good to get into it. I mean, there's other palettes which I've kind of experimented with, and I do some portrait work as well, and tend to just use the Zorn palette for that, purely because I'm still kind of figuring it out in my mind. You know, so why not keep it as simple as possible?
Exactly.
But with landscape, you know, it's better to kind of have a range of color to take out.
Yeah, they're just tools to use, and use what works for the vision that you have. They're colors of convenience. There are folks that advocate limited palette. I often use a limited palette, but a lot of times I will put out modifiers or specialty colors depending on the project that I'm working on. So, like you mentioned, King's Blue, that could be a color that I could put on my palette for something that features that type of where that would be useful. But but the more you use it, the more you get familiar with that, and then you can experiment with those things. I'm sure every artist listening to this probably thinks I'm crazy, but
I wouldn't have thought so. But I mean, I think it's also important that, if you're, so I've kind of been settled on this palette for quite a while now. And, I'll always lay it out in the exact same way. And, I know where everything is. And the more that I'm using the color, the more intuitive it becomes to make the correct mixes without having to think about it too much, because it's like, you know where the brush needs to go. You haven't got to I don't have to worry that when I'm out in bright sunlight, my alizarin permanent looks a little bit like my transparent red oxide. I don't want to grab the wrong one and stick it in. I know where it is on the palette. I know where everything is. So it's good to be organized that way.
You get your muscle
and the more
memory.
that you use, yeah. Exactly. You just know where everything's going to be. Can you hear that in the background, by the way?
I hear a little something. It's very faint, though.
Okay.
What is that?
Okay. Yeah. It's a call to prayer. Oh. So my studio is quite close to a mosque. So we get the call to prayer every so often.
Oh wow, that's neat. I've never heard that before.
Let me. I know they've stopped. But yeah, I mean it's beautiful actually. I mean it's quite often when I'm out in the landscape. When I mentioned that I passed through some of these small villages to get to some of these big mountain areas, and quite often, well, almost always there's a small mosque within these villages. So I'll be 2 miles down the road. I've hiked through or whatever else, and I can still hear the call to prayer, and it will reverberate off the mountain and the walls of the wadis. I mean, it's quite the experience, really. When you're in that kind of place on your own, and all you can hear is this singing. It's crazy.
Wow!
But that's why it's so amazing to be able to get out and do that.
That's
one of the reasons.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about any interesting experiences you've had in doing outdoor painting.
There's been a few, but I mean, I think for what I'm doing, I mean, most of the experiences come from when I'll see somebody that I shouldn't be there. It's like there's no absolutely in their mind. There's no reason whatsoever that this guy should be standing in the middle of a mountain on his own, covered in tattoos, short sleeves, beard, wearing a baseball cap, looking like he's doing some kind of work on a computer. The edge looks a little bit like a laptop.
It does, yes.
I've had a few, inquisitive goat herders coming over. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But one of the nicest experiences that I had was actually I was running a workshop, and it was the last day of the workshop, and we were painting in one of my favorite spots, which is very close to one of these villages. And this car came, or like a off-roader came, kind of stopped maybe about 200 yards from where we were. Stopped there for ages, went down the window, and this young girl kind of had her head out the window, was looking to see what was going on. Then she came over the dad got out of the car. They came over. She was kind of looking and giggling, and she's very shy. The dad didn't speak any English. She didn't speak any English either. And then anyway, they stayed for a while, and they were kind of watching what we were doing. I was trying to communicate, but it was very difficult. So they went, and then probably about half an hour later or so, they came back, and the girl, she came back, and she had some drawings that she had done. So she had literally gone home, and she had picked up her drawings and come back, and she was showing me her drawings. It was an amazing experience. So I asked her and her dad to come over to the easel where I was doing the demo, let her paint a little bit on the canvas. And then she gave me one of her drawings, and I gave her one of the brushes. So
that's
it was a lovely, it was an amazing moment, and I mean, you don't get moments like that very often, I mean, it certainly hasn't happened since in that way, but I mean, that will stay with me for forever, Other than that, I mean, there's always camels and goats coming over trying to eat my paints, but that's I've only ever had to move once, but yeah, the camel just wouldn't give it a rest, and that's true story. He just came over, and there was no camels anywhere near me either at the time. So I set up, and then the guy just kind of. So technically, there's no wild camels here, so they're all owned. They're all kind of farmed. So when you're out. So they're all owned, but I mean, he was not on his own. So you could see he was owned. He had his, they have their like tags on their feet and stuff. But yeah, he just came over. First he was in my rubbish bag. Then he was trying to get into my Jeep. And then, then he was trying to do the paint. I was like, you know what? this isn't happening. It wasn't a good painting either, so I was like, let's pack this up and get going.
Distracted by a camel.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I haven't had that happen. I've heard bear stories here in the States, bears and rattlesnakes, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's a little less terrifying than a bear.
Yeah.
I actually painted recently in had an amazing experience of I was basically invited to go and paint in one of the protected areas of the region. So there's a few there's about 5 or 6 protected large areas which the public don't have any access to. And there'd always be like areas of either high natural beauty or there's some kind of significance to those areas. Like there's wildlife that you wouldn't get anywhere else. So this particular one, it was open up until about 8 years ago. And unfortunately, the human footprint was causing too much of an issue. And it was, they had butterflies and fauna and flora and one particular type of goat that wasn't anywhere else in the region. So they just closed it off. And it became a UNESCO site, I think about 3 years ago. Anyway, so it came about. So I made a video about my life painting here, and one of the park rangers was following my Instagram account, strangely enough, and he saw the video and kind of put it up to his superiors about getting me into the park to actually go and paint in there. So I was there. It was a couple of weeks now. I got to spend the day there going around. I mean, this is somewhere just incredible. It's a place called Wadi Waraya. And because we've had so much rain recently, it was all green. I mean, it kind of looked like, parts of it, like the mountains of France or Switzerland. I mean, it was unbelievable. And because nobody's been putting any kind of footprint in that park for so long, everything is natural. Everything just is growing as it should be. So anyway, the park ranger, he pretty much gave me free rein. It took me to kind of, it's called the viewpoint. And then he was like, just if you walk that way, you'll come to a waterfall. And then if you keep going, you get to Snake Canyon. I was like, what? Excuse me. This way, you go to Snake Canyon. It's very beautiful. It's like, okay. So, why is it called Snake Canyon? It's like, from above, it looks like snake, but also there's many snakes. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, very beautiful. Very beautiful. Okay. So anyway, so he told me that I had to check back in with them every 2 hours. So the point that he had talked about where the hike would end and where he was saying would be beautiful to go and paint, it was about 45 minutes hike. It wasn't a difficult hike. It was all fairly level. It was rocky, but it was fairly level, so it wasn't too strenuous. It was like, you just keep looking where you're walking. If you see snake, you move away from snake. It's like, okay, yep, no problem with moving away from the snake. So it's the only place in there. Yeah, I got you. Also scorpions as well, apparently. So it's the only place in the whole of the UAE that has a poisonous snake. It's some kind of viper they had there. Anyway, so the first hike that I did, so I actually went twice within the same day. So I got there early and I got to the waterfall and it was stunning. So I spent just over an hour or so painting the waterfall. And then I knew that the rest of the hike was around 45 minutes or maybe a little bit less to at least see where it was. So I packed up my stuff and I walked to it knowing that I wasn't going to paint and then had to go back to meet him. And then I was like, right, I'm going to go again. So then I did the hike again and then ended up in this I've never seen anything like it here before. It was just stunning. I mean, we talk about Edgar Payne, Southwest paintings. I mean, it's just, I have an Edgar Payne book, The Scenic Journey. And on the front cover is this kind of big canyon scene with the three little horses going through it. Anyway, it was so reminiscent of that. And then it had this small bit of water, like the stream coming down. Thankfully, no snakes. Well, I'm sure there were. I thankfully didn't see any. But it was just an absolute magical experience to paint there. And I gifted one of the paintings to them to enable basically a free pass into the park to go and paint. So it's so I'll be painting there again pretty soon.
Yeah, see, that's very smart and thoughtful. It's generosity goes a long ways, not only in painting but anything that we do in life. So that's a great move there. I like that.
Yeah, it's I mean, to get the access in the first place was, I mean, it's so rare to have, especially when you're taking external materials into something like that. Oil paints are natural. I had to explain, the pigments and everything else. But still, I'm taking stuff into the park that could affect it. But obviously I'm very careful. I'm very cautious with the materials that I'm using while I'm there. So, for them to give me the opportunity to still go in and do that, and knowing, or at least in my mind, knowing how, what a big moment that is. I thought, the least I can do is gift the painting.
Did you take photographs there as well?
I did. I took a lot. I'm not the best photographer in the world, but I mean, the other thing was I knew I was going to be hiking, so I didn't want to take my big SLR. So I really had my iPhone. Mainly, I had it on the portrait mode. I find is a little bit better for taking photos of landscapes. It tends to just kind of get the color a little bit more accurate. So I took a ton of photos, but I mean, the plein air references that I painted, it's just much more important than the photos, for the color and everything else anyway. But there's one actually where I painted that scene that I was just explaining to you. That's I'm planning to build that into a large studio piece pretty soon. So, yeah.
One of the things I enjoy about following you on Instagram is you post a lot of images of you outdoor painting in some of these magnificent places. I don't know if this was one of those places. My memory is not that good. I'll have to go back and check it all out. But
it's on there. It's
on there. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to have to stream back through it. I'll include a link in the show notes so that they can find you on Instagram. It's a lot of fun to watch your adventures there. So I guess I'm a voyeur of.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, because like half of what I'm doing is really, I find myself trying to explain, and this is why I actually made the video that I made, is to try and explain that I'm not just painting. Well, I'm hardly ever painting in the city. And if somebody was to look at my Instagram account or my website and not read the blurb, to see where I'm actually painting, it could be confused with, somewhere in the Southwest or, somewhere else in the world. So I think it's important for me to kind of get parts of the image that I'm actually painting into the world, as well as obviously the paintings themselves, just so people know how beautiful it is here.
Mentioned this short film a couple of times, which I really think is beautifully done.
Thank you.
Can you tell me the story about doing this film and why it was important to do so, and the value of doing it?
Absolutely. So I've been thinking about doing a film for a while. So I went to the UK and I took a workshop with Rosemary & Co, or organised through Rosemary & Co, which are the makers of the brushes that I'm using. It was a Casey Barr workshop. And I met the videographer, who's called Joe Hawkins, who was currently he's in the UK. He was doing a lot of the videos, or he was part of the East Oaks group. So working with Michael Plein and those guys over in, I think it's Raleigh. They were so he was doing the video work with them, and then he was over working on a job with Rosemary & Co, making this video with Casey. And anyway, I'd seen his videos through and also short artist films that he'd been making with the guys from East Oak Studio, and then seen some of the footage that he was obviously capturing at this workshop. And I was like, this guy he's going to be perfect for making the film. So we had a a very real conversation about him coming over. And it was only about three months after the workshop, he came over. It was just before Christmas he was here, so the weather was perfect. And what I wanted was basically I wanted a video for self-promotion. I wanted something that I could share. So when I'm speaking to galleries and when I'm speaking to collectors and also potential clients for commission work, I have this well-made, professionally produced video that I can send them and be like, look, this is what I'm doing. It's quite clear the vision that we managed to get across for what I'm trying to do here. So I wanted something solid to be able to send out. And working with Joe, I knew that he was very good at kind of capturing that side of it because he's worked with so many artists. When he was here, I took him out to some amazing locations. And Simi actually from Rosemary & Co. was over as well. So we actually made 2 videos. So we made one for Rosemary & Co. and then we made the personal video for me.
Oh, nice.
So it's quite short. The Rosemary & Co. video is obviously we're just talking about brushes, but we are out in these incredible locations doing the painting, and then there's parts which are just interview. So again, it was great to be associated with them as well, and have this kind of video that they're pushing and I'm pushing. Yeah, so it was great to have. In terms of what the video's done since it's been produced, firstly, it got me into that park. It's difficult to know the impact of something like that immediately. I just think it's great to have, and it's great to be able to send out, to be able to see a result from it immediately is great. So it's very helpful in kind of getting my, I won't say story because it's, I don't think my story is really any more interesting than anyone else's, but it's a little bit different. So it's good to be able to get that out.
I think everyone has a story to tell. It doesn't, they don't have to be in an exotic location, but they have a story to tell. And you're very fortunate to be where you are. And I think that's great. But these videos, they're so powerful because so few people actually do them. And do them well. And that's what stood out about this film that you did. It was very beautifully done. It conveys the land, the location of where you paint, where you live. It conveys the essence of who you are as an artist. And then right off the bat, I noticed, as you mentioned just a few moments ago, but I noticed it when we were talking about that national park or preserve there, it got you in the door. And I think, wow, see, that's something you can't even anticipate about something like this. It can get you into doors. So,
exactly.
Kudos to you for taking this project on. So the filmmaker's name, you mentioned him before. I forgot his name already.
So it's Joe Hawkins.
And what kind of equipment was he shooting with? Do you know?
He was using, the majority was done with a handheld. Okay. I don't know what, I don't know what the specs were on the camera. Yeah, but he did the majority handheld. Obviously, he had a tripod with him. We wanted to use drones, but bringing them into the country, there was a risk that they'd be taken. So we decided not to go with the drone footage. But yeah, he got everything he needed pretty much. Certainly when we were outdoors, just on when I say handheld, he had it on his shoulder with a pad thing. I don't know anything about filming, which you may be able to tell.
Well, I was just curious.
I was just blabbing my way through it, just like a camera, a biggish camera, slightly medium size. I don't know. So had a big lens on it.
So when you sat down to contemplate making a film, did you have in mind a message that you wanted to get across? How did the story develop so that you ended up with the film that you have?
So the main thing for me was to get a lot of location work in. So the interview part was important, but it was very much secondary for me. Joe was keen to have it in because it obviously gives us the narrative for the film. But for me, what I wanted was really to try and explain to people just what the beauty is of this region because of the misconceptions of of this part of the world. And also just knowing that you can kind of go out on your own and just be out there and create this work. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, like I said, it was very much about getting the locations out there and also some information, of course, about what I'm doing. But yeah, so I think we got a good balance of the two.
Yeah, I think it's a beautifully done film, and I think it's going to serve you well. I'm glad to see that you did that. It's very nice.
Thank you.
So you mentioned earlier, I got to go back to something you said early in our conversation. We've been focusing in on the UAE as far as your painting there, but you mentioned you also painted in Ireland.
Yeah.
What a contrast that is. So tell me about that.
Yeah, no, you couldn't really get much different. I mean, it's all kind of yellows here, and it's all very much green there.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I have a bit of a long history with Ireland. My wife is Irish, so I've spent. I lived in Ireland for a few years.
My daughter-in-law is Irish. She's from Ireland. Yeah.
Whereabouts in Ireland?
I don't know. She posted on Facebook today the name of the town that she was from, and I can't even pronounce it, so I don't know.
Very good. Yeah, well, I mean, that's how my my connection is really my wife. So I'm British, but the first time I lived in Ireland was actually when we'd been living here in the UAE for 5 years. We met here, and then we actually decided to move back. So I've lived here twice now. So we did actually leave here and then went back to Ireland, and I was there it was 2 years, and then we came back. The weather was a bit too much. It was a bit too cold and a bit too wet. And things were kind of picking up here again. And, there was a lot of reasons to come back. So, and when I was in Ireland, at that time, I wasn't really painting very much in the way of landscape. So I wasn't connected to the landscape when I was there. Now, when I was back here, after I'd returned to Ireland, to the UAE, a friend of mine she's a painter, she's Irish, she had told me about this plein air festival that happens in a place called Wexford. And it's once a year, and it's called Art in the Open. And it's basically it's a plein air festival similar to what you'd have in America.
Right.
Obviously there's loads in America, but there's not very many in Europe. So it's the biggest one in Europe. So when I went for the first time, so I was living here, and then I traveled back, kind of tied in with the trip that we were having to go and see my wife's family. It's the first time that I'd ever painted outdoors with anybody else. So I'd seen plein air painting. I had painted outside here a few times, but it was very, very little experience. And then I went back, just kind of thought, you know what, let's give this a go. And there was around 150 artists there or so, very much mixed abilities, but a lot of them were professional, making their living from painting. So that kind of really opened up my eyes to the possibilities, I guess, of, really kind of pushing plein air painting and landscape painting outside of, I was doing a lot of wildlife work and portrait commissions and this sort of thing. So that trip kind of really tipped me over the edge and got me hooked on plein air painting. I mean, I was painting for 5 days. I think I did 2 paintings a day. Some of the days I did 3. It was just such an intense experience. And then I came back and, just had this, real fire to push plein air painting here. Yeah. So that's when I really, really kind of committed to it,
Nice. Now, what part of Ireland was this?
So it's Wexford. So it's on the east coast. So there's some beautiful kind of coastal locations. Like there's one area called Hook Head, which is just stunning. It's like the oldest lighthouse, maybe in the world, I think, or maybe in Europe. But it's surrounded by all these beautiful cliffs and just like this incredible power of the water. And I think also because like I was coming from here, and the water is very flat and turquoise here, so there's never really too much in the way of exciting seascapes to paint. So the first time I saw like Hook Head, I was like, wow, this is beautiful. So you have like the coast, and then you have these kind of quaint Irish towns, which are just, they'll have the beautiful arched bridges and old architecture and local pub to go down. And then they have the beaches, and they have a real mix of stuff. So for people who paint architecture, for people who paint the coast, for people who paint, countryside, this sort of thing. Not so much in the way of deserts and rocky mountains, but
you got to go someplace different,
which would make my life a little bit easier when I go back. But So it's a great festival. So credit to the guys who organize it.
Very nice. Well, it lit a fire in you, so it was well worth
absolutely
having that experience. One of the things, since we were talking about the film, that's part of your branding, which is a very important part of our development of artists, especially if we want to benefit financially from the work that we produce. One of the other things I've noticed in your branding is you have a beautiful website. You've given a lot of attention to it. And I just wanted to commend you on that. It's a very well done website.
Thank you very much.
Did you do that yourself?
So the base was done by a designer, but I actually took over and completely redesigned it. So I had the bulk of categories and that sort of stuff was done, but I wasn't too happy with how it fit with my current, like you said, branding. So the old design that I had just needed a redesign. So I took on the redesign myself. I took off probably 80% of the content that was on there. So I had basically everything that I'd ever produced was on my website. It's like this isn't the right way to do it. So I just trimmed it down. So the gallery now has very specific categories of land, sea, and portrait. And then within each of those, there's what I consider to be the best work that I've produced. So there's, I literally paint every day. So, if I try to put in all of the work that I'm producing, then of course there's just too much content. So same with anything else, same with the Instagram account. By filtering out what isn't going to give you the best representation of your current work has got to go. And that was the same with the Instagram account. That was the same with the website. And then I've put in those particular categories. Then I added in separately a plein air category. And within that, I only put kind of shots on location. So, that's kind of like you were talking about with the Instagram account of it's nice to see the places that you're painting. So that's what that category is. And then I've embedded the film into it. And then there's a contact, and that's it. So I've just tried to keep it as minimal as possible, because, we all know that social media are the new websites anyway. But of course it's good to have, and it's good. If it looks good and it's a good representation of you, then you're going to be taken a little more seriously. So I just did a complete rehaul on it, and I'm delighted with how it's looking now.
Yeah, it looks great. What platform do you have it on?
It's on Wix. Yeah, it's so simple. Yeah, I know there's so many different platforms to use, but like Wix for me is just a whole drag and drop. It just made my life so much easier.
Yeah,
and it means that once I produce something that I think this can go on the website, I literally just log in, pop it on, drag it in, and it's done. It's there. And I can rearrange, the other images to fit around it as well. So Wix is working out well.
Do you sell your artwork through your website, or how is it that you sell your work?
So I don't have a store on the website. I did originally, and then I just wasn't. You pay to have the store, and I just wasn't at that time getting enough traffic through to the website and making enough sales through the website. So I did actually take the store off, but I think I'm going to be putting it back on pretty soon. So I sell multiple ways. So I do sell through social media, not a huge amount, but I sell a few pieces through Instagram, generally small plein air studies. So I don't put everything up for sale, but occasionally I'll make something available through social media. So they can be sold that way. And then I work with a couple of galleries here, and the rest is through, I do studio sales. I do one studio sale a year, which I've just done. And then the rest of the work is generally on commission.
How does that work, a studio sale? What do you mean by that?
So basically I put in work that has either been exhibited and not sold, and not working with that gallery anymore, or it is plein air studies which I've not made available, or just kind of smaller works which I would consider just studies, kind of practice work, working on my brushwork and that sort of stuff. So I put those into the sale, and then I just advertise it as an open studio for people to come down and take a look around, have a coffee, and buy some artwork.
I forgot to mention your website address. What is it?
It's just riderscanvas.com.
We'll include a link in the show notes for this episode. At the beginning of this show, I started talking about Edgar Payne. That was my impression of your art. And clearly he's had some influence on you. He was a source of inspiration to you. But like many artists, I think we have a number of influences. And I'd like for you to, if you don't mind, share some of the artists that you admire. They may not necessarily influence your art, but perhaps they inspire what you do as an artist.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I think with the invention of social media, you can be overwhelmed, with so much quality content. It's like I'm discovering new artists literally every day. Be somebody I've never heard of, and then I'll see the work, might go down this rabbit hole of just looking at their whole kind of back catalogue, and it's amazing. But then at the same time, it's very easy to, or no, it's not very easy at all. It's very difficult to come up with new ideas, which actually you touched on earlier, of how do you do something original when you see such a large amount of content. But I mean, like going back in history, I think most people who are painting landscapes or portraits or realism of any kind are going to be influenced by Sargent. But in particular, and there's two paintings that Sargent did, which have probably influenced me more than anything else, more than Edgar Payne's work, which are, the names of the paintings are the Simplon Pass, which I think it was up in Switzerland. It's just such a beautiful composition. And that was probably one of the first kind of close-up rock paintings which I'd seen. It's like, this is so beautiful, and there's so little information in what he's doing. And then the other one, which would be a lesser known painting, I believe, and I actually don't even know if I'm going to pronounce this right. So I think it's called the Moraine, which is also one of the paintings that he did, I believe, around Switzerland. And that is basically, it's like a collection of glacial shards almost. And it's just, when you actually really kind of analyze that painting and look at the brushwork and how little information is done there, that's what I'm really trying to portray with the work that I'm doing. It's getting as much information with as little information. So, I'm a big fan of that, standing far away from painting and then seeing it looks so sharp and crisp, and all of the information is exactly where it should be. And then as you get closer and closer and closer, you get, abstract brushwork and, just all the little details. And for me, that's what, like if I'm hanging a piece of artwork in my house, that's what's going to keep me interested in this painting for the next 20 years, 30 years, whatever it might be. Just the brushwork. I think maybe that's because we're artists, but yeah. So that painting really taught me a great deal about that. So yeah, he would be, of course, as for everybody else, he's a massive influence. And then generally, like the rest of them are the Western guys. So Glenn Dean for his color. I mean, his work is just beautiful. Of course, Matt Smith.
Oh yeah,
I really enjoyed his podcast actually that you did. Just again because he's kind of zooming in on these areas of just there's little corners of rock and cactus, and it's just stunning what he's doing. And then he's capturing the light. Yeah, so Matt Smith is definitely someone's work who I look to a lot.
Yeah, you two are very similar in the type of terrain that you you adventure into. Skip Whitcomb called him a desert gypsy.
Right. Yeah. It was funny actually when I was making the video with Joe and Simi from Rosemary Co. Well, we're just having a chat, and we're walking through these valleys, and I was like, I think Matt Smith would quite like to come over here and paint that. I think Matt Smith would quite like to come over here and paint that. It's just like looking around and everything looks like a Matt Smith painting. I want it to look like a Matt Ryder painting. I'm like, all I can think is, Matt Smith would do a great job on that.
I tell you, he's well worth taking a workshop from too, if you ever have the opportunity to do so. He's a real joy to learn how to paint from.
Yeah, I'm sure. He's got a lot to offer. And then, I took a workshop with Jeremy Lipking as well.
Oh, that's nice.
So that was a beautiful workshop. So again, even though the majority of what he's doing is figurative, it's just his sense of color and brushwork is just incredible. And then of course you've got the big guys like Scott Christensen and Clive Asperveg. Yeah, there's so many. You could just go on and on and on. But this is the problem. It's just yeah.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. And, I'm inspired by those guys too, but I'm also inspired by the discoveries that I make on Instagram, like you. I'm inspired by your work. So it's just, we inspire one another, hopefully, and we learn from one another as we do these things.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's it's difficult not to be inspired, but then of course it can be overwhelming, when there's that much,
True.
When there's so many artists who are producing just such high quality work. That's, I think it's important not to get inside your own head too much and focus on what you're doing. And, when I teach with workshops and, I speak to other artists here, it's very much of, look, this is how I paint. You just, we might be looking at the same subject matter, but you approach it how you like. This is how I approach it. This is my color palette. But, the main thing is that you're out, you're out and you're doing it. And it's always just going to be, your subject matter might change over time. Your brush application might change over time, but ultimately it's, your enthusiasm that's going to keep you going. So
when you teach a workshop, the students that are in your class, are they absolute beginners or are they more advanced? What range of skills do they have?
It's a real mix. I only started doing workshops about a year and a half ago. I did my first one, so they're quite intense. They're 2 day over the space of 2 days, and we go out into the mountains, and almost, in fact, all of the attendees on the first workshop I took, not a single one of them had ever painted outside before. So all of them had been painting in the studio, and there were two painters two artists who'd never painted in oil. So they came along. It was oil painting workshop. So it's a real mixability. But I try to tailor them, especially because where I am, it's, you have to kind of be able to cover all bases, really. Yeah. So, this summer I'm teaching a workshop in France, which will be my first time teaching in Europe.
Nice.
And that, I think, really will be more suited to people who have a little bit more experience. Everything can be tailored. As long as all I ask from my students is to show up and be enthusiastic about painting and be excited about what we're doing, then I can tailor to everybody specifically.
What do you think it takes to be a good student?
I think the only thing it takes to be a good student is enthusiasm. It's, of course, good listening also helps, and observation. Yep. But the main thing is, one of the things I do with the workshops when I teach outdoors is I get everybody to get their own kit. So I don't provide anything. So, even if they've never painted in oil before, I'm insistent that to come on the workshop, you've got to have all of it.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
You've got to have per shade box. You've got to have the full list of colors that I send out. That's the minimum. So you've got to turn up with that. And then what I find is once they have the equipment, it makes them immediately more enthusiastic to learn, because one, it's not cheap, to get a kit from scratch. And it means that they're going to continue painting after the workshop, because, for me, there doesn't seem a lot of point in taking a workshop if you're not going to at least try and put some of what you learn into practice. I mean, obviously there's so much information that you can gain from, especially if it's a longer workshop, like a 4 or 5 day workshop. There's just so much information. But if you go to that and then if you don't paint for 2 months or 3 months, that information, it goes. It doesn't stay in your mind. Snippets might be there, but what I find is if they're enthusiastic about it and they have the gear and they have a fun workshop and they see these amazing places that they didn't necessarily know were here, they're much more likely to continue. And then, as you've said a few times before, it's brush mileage then that makes a good student into a good painter. It takes a lot of canvas. You get through a lot of brushes before you start getting to those good paintings.
I'm wearing them out.
I absolutely. Me too. There's still, like, as I said, I took a huge amount of work off my website and off my Instagram, which at the time when I did it, I was like, okay, this is maybe all right. And then, you look back and you realize that there's problems. And it's only when you're really getting in that brush mileage, you start to kind of level up. I think that term's been used before, but, you get to a point where you're producing paintings at a certain level and you feel like you're kind of going stagnant, or, you're just not improving. And then all of a sudden you've suddenly gone up a level. You produce one good painting and then another good painting and then another good painting. Like, okay, something's happened, something's sunk in, I've got some extra mileage. And then, you paint like that for a while. And then eventually you become stagnant again. You think, I'm not improving. And then, you level up again. And then that's what it takes. But that leveling up process takes time and practice, and, taking one workshop and then not putting what you're learning into practice. And not even necessarily what you're learning, just putting brush onto canvas over and over and over again. That's what's going to make you a better painter in the long run.
I found that to be true, even with myself. I mean, I love to read a lot of books. I've been to a few workshops. I put a moratorium on going to workshops for myself, because I realize, okay, I've got the fundamentals from these guys. I've got to teach my hands and my eyes and my brain to put it all together and make it work. So that's what I've been focusing in on of late.
Yeah,
now, I do go to a demo, but.
Well, I mean, demos are interesting, because with my workshops, I'll always start the day with a demo. I think it's important to see other painters painting, especially if you've not, either approached that particular subject matter before, or maybe haven't even painted outdoors before. Just kind of to knock the edge off the fear, seeing somebody just do it and then create something. I think it's really important, and I love demos. I enjoy doing them, but I mean they never turn out quite as well as I plan. But I love watching demos. I just love watching other painters paint, and I think it's a really important part of learning. With brush application, it's even watching somebody put a brush to canvas and the way that they actually, maybe even twist the brush or use the side of the brush, or, scruff it into the canvas, just seeing how different marks are made. Of course, you can figure all that out by just trying everything, and that does come with time. But yeah, I mean, you can learn little tips of just brush application. It's fascinating. And even the amount of paint that people use, Yeah. I remember when I first started painting, I was putting out little dabs of paint. I was being so precious with it. the more I painted and the more I watched, the pros painting, I was like, okay, I'm not putting out anywhere near enough paint. And it's, half of the problem I was having with those early bad paintings was there just wasn't enough paint going onto my palette. And so I was having to remix, and I was never getting the lush brushwork that I wanted. I was like, it's just everything was very thin. Of course, there's the space on that canvas to have the thin areas, but without globs and globs of paint on your palette, you're never going to get that, lush feeling of paint, So,
exactly,
things like that, you can just pick it up at a demo. You might just, you never know what you're going to learn.
You're so right. And I've learned that there's more than one way to do something too. This artist here, he does it this way. This artist here takes this approach. It's liberating in a way, because then I go into this analysis paralysis sometimes of, okay, how am I going to do this?
Phrase. That's a good phrase.
Well, it comes from my IT days. When I was in IT, we would examine a problem so long. That was the tendency that you would never get started with coding, actually building the thing that you've been hired to do. So I always called it analysis paralysis. At some point, you just got to jump in and lay the first, write the first line of code or put down the first brush stroke. So
I'm taking that. I'm stealing it.
You go right ahead. Well, Matt, it has been a real pleasure talking with you. This has been exciting to talk about what you're doing in the United Arab Emirates there, and in Ireland and elsewhere. It's just, I'm inspired by what you're doing. Thank you for being on the Artful Painter.
Thanks so much, Carl. Thank you so much. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And like I said, I love just listening to your podcast as well. So it's a real pleasure to have you call and to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine. I would love to go painting with Matt Ryder. What an enthusiastic and passionate painter. And look at the landscape that he is endeavoring to capture that few of us have ever set foot on. I think this is such a wonderful opportunity and experience that he has. And it would be great to be able to go out there and paint with him in the UAE. I was thinking too, as I was listening to some of his adventures, there was an alternate quote. I didn't use it at the beginning of this episode, but it's a quote by John Singer Sargent. Now, whether it's 100% true or not, I don't know. I don't really have time to go back and validate each of these quotes, but one that was attributed to him is, make the best of an emergency. So hopefully Matt will not have an emergency out in the middle of the desert and those beautiful mountain ranges that he paints in. So very nice, very nice. I really appreciate Matt taking the time to talk with us today. Be sure to check out his videos. There's the one video that he did for Rosemary and Co. And then there is the other one that was produced by Joe Hawkins. It's a short film, the promotional film that we talked about in this episode. It is extremely beautiful. It's a fantastic film. I encourage you to go see it. I have the links in the blog post and show notes for this episode. Also check out his website. His website is rydercanvas.com. Also check out his social media. You can search for Matt Ryder. That's Ryder. And you will find him on Instagram and Facebook there. He's really doing a fantastic job with social media. I am not doing anything near like what he's doing, so I can learn from him, and I think you can too. I certainly appreciate the feedback that keeps coming in. This one's from Deborah Stamp. She says, your podcasts have accompanied me on long car rides, flights, puttering around the kitchen, and just relaxing. They are terrific productions. I'm especially intrigued by the music clips you use as bumpers and interludes. When painting in the studio, I always listen to music, and the music you play on podcasts feels like the perfect companion to creating. I was wondering if you could share your sources. If you find it another way, well, I would love to know if you're willing to share. This is kind of a long shot request, but I figured, what the heck, just ask him. Thanks for all you're doing for the art community. Hope to meet you in person someday. Cordially, Deborah. Deborah, thank you, and I hope we do get to meet up face-to-face someday in the future, especially after all this pandemic stuff is over. Yeah, your long shot request to find out where I get my music is not such a long shot. I will share it not only with you. Actually, I already have shared it with her. I did respond to her email, but I'll share it with my audience as well. I use music right now from a source. It's a subscription source. Costs me about $15 a month. It's called Epidemic Sound, and I have a referral link in the show notes. It's epidemicsound.com. But if you use the referral link and you decide to subscribe to the service, I get a little bit of a commission from that, which helps support the show. So thank you very much for asking that question, Deborah, and thank you for your kind words about the podcast. Oh, and a PS on Deborah. By the way, she did something smart. She included her URL, her website address. So I'm going to give you that. It's deborahstampart.com. There will be a link in the show notes for that. Check out her art. Anytime you do a feedback like that and you leave a link, I will do my best to share it. I can't always promise that I will, but it doesn't hurt to put it in there. Anyway, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode. I love hearing from everyone. If you want to send me a note, you can go to my website at carlolson.tv and click the contact tab, fill it out, and it will get to me. I do send out the occasional email for each episode that comes out. If you're on my email list, you will get notification. You can opt into that. When you go to my website, you'll see the usual pop-ups and entry points where you can sign up for my newsletter. And by the way, when you do, I'm using Squarespace right now, and they require a double opt-in. So what will happen? I've noticed that several hundred people have logged in, signed up, but very few of those have actually done the double opt-in. So what will happen is you'll sign up, then you'll get a opt-in email to verify your opt-in. So make sure you click on that, and then you'll be part of the email list. All right? Anyway, these are certainly strange and stressful times for all of us, so I hope you find peace in painting. I hope all of you and your families remain safe at this time. I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to this edition of The Artful Painter. There are more episodes coming. You are going to really enjoy the lineup that's coming very, very soon. So I will see you all in the next episode.
Picture on the TV.